Welcome to Incredible Idaho. I'm Jack Hemingway. Tonight, we'll introduce you to a peculiar little bird that lives in Idaho's desert country. It's called the burrowing owl, and true to its name, it burrows deep into the earth to build its nest. They take over abandoned badger and marmot holes like this, adopting them as a home to build their nests and raise their young. The burrowing owl is the only North American raptor, bird of prey that is, that nests underground.
They're very curious little creatures. They're kind of comical looking. They have kind of long legs, and they stand on their burrows. They do a lot of bobbing, and they're really kind of funny little creatures.
This is the third year that researchers Bob Lehman and George Carpenter have been keeping tabs on these burrowing owls. It's part of a larger study called the Bench Survey, conducted by the Bureau of Land Management and the Idaho Army National Guard. Biologists are compiling an inventory on raptors, everything from prairie falcons to golden eagles, that nest in the Snake River Birds of Prey area.
There it is.
It's fairly easy for biologists to observe and examine the nest sites of most birds of prey, but the burrowing owls present a special problem. Since they nest underground, it's a little tough for scientists to study their reproductive biology. But researchers have overcome that obstacle by installing artificial nest sites. An 8-foot-long pipe connected to a large plastic bucket buried beneath the earth.
Okay, let's take this thing off and see what's inside. Well, looks like we have a clutch of 8 eggs.
So this is site number 9?
Site number 9.
So we got 8 eggs and flesh. Did they feel warm?
Yeah, they were warm. They're definitely being...
The female must have only recently left the nest, probably just as the biologists approached. Burrowing owls have a strong nest fidelity. This means that even though scientists may flush a bird off her nest, there's little chance she'll abandon it. On this nest site, we catch the female still in her burrow. She peeks out and then ducks back in, just out of sight.
The female does most of the incubating, and the male brings her food. And this is the case throughout the incubation period. Once the young have hatched, they're both very busy bringing prey into the nest. And it takes about 30 days for the eggs to hatch, and another 35 days or so for the young to fledge. Well, let's see what she's got in here.
Finally, she's had enough, and she bolts.
Whoa!
She goes.
She lands a short distance away and keeps a steady vigil. The nest reveals that 5 more eggs have been added to the original 3. By midsummer, these eggs will have hatched, and the young will be about to fledge. That means to fly for the very first time. By then, it's sometimes difficult, even for biologists, to distinguish the young from the adults. But it doesn't matter to most of us whether they're adults or this year's offspring. Spending a summer morning watching a family of burrowing owls can be a wonderfully entertaining way to pass the time. You could call this next story a living portrait of old-fashioned American culture. Just two guys, a lazy summer afternoon, a slow-moving river. It reaches back to the tales of Mark Twain and Huck Finn dipping his line into the muddy Mississippi.
Where the river runs deep and the water is cold as ice. River runs deep and the water is cold as ice. Go down there, river chance again. It's where my baby she had a day. And the river runs deep and the water is cold as ice.
Oh, hello.
Must have just had him by the whisker because he just got off.
Angler Tim Shelton says one of the things he enjoys most about catfishing is that you never have to wait long between bites.
The whole bottom of this river's got to be full of catfish. The numbers have got to be incredible.
A Snake River channel catfish averages in size from about 1.5 pounds to 8 pounds. This one being on the lower end of that scale. But there can also be some big ones lurking down below. The Idaho State record channel catfish weighed in at 31 pounds. And the largest flathead catfish was pulled out of this river weighing over 36 pounds.
There's a bite. Oh. You don't get them all. Catfishing is probably one of the most relaxing type of fishing that you can do. I mean, it's pretty tough to beat just sitting out here and watching the river go by and listening to all the different birds sing. And
catfish don't feed so much by sight, but more by smell and taste. So your best bet is to bring along a variety of baits. Shrimp or chicken livers work well. But today we seem to be having luck with a different kind of bait called rad.
Actually, what it is, it's spinal cord out of beef, and that also gives a real good scent trail and real good odor for catfishing.
See, it's just barely moving, but I got a feeling he's gonna jerk it here. Yep, there it goes. Fish will come up below the bait, grab the bait and sort of mouth it. And when he does that, you'll see the tip of your rod it's like a peck at the end of your rod.
The dorsal fin and both of the pectoral fins have a spine. And if you do get a puncture wound from them, it's quite painful because they do carry a toxin. And again, here are the barbels, which are used as a taste organism or organ. They go along the bottom, and these help them detect food.
It's no mystery how the catfish got its name. Whiskers like this only belong on the king of beasts.
Just another old catfish.
I like to eat fish, and there's probably not a finer eating fish than these critters. And look at that. More than a mother could love a fish like that.
River runs deep and the water is cold as ice.
There's no finer end to a day of catfishing than a meal made from your catch. Tim demonstrates the simplest and easiest way to fillet a channel catfish.
The way I go about it is I come down the dorsal fin and I find a little bone that sticks out just at the base of the dorsal fin. I take my knife and I come right down to the flesh or right down to the backbone and then cut right along that backbone. And actually you get a fillet without any bones whatsoever.
Catfish actually have a thin skin rather than scales. This is easily removed by laying it flat on the cutting board and slicing the meat right off. Eventually, the day's catch of catfish turned into a plate full of fillets. Catfish can be prepared a myriad of different ways, but if you like spicy food and a no-fat way to prepare it, set up your camp stove or your barbecue to cook outside because this flavorful dish blows a lot of smoke.
Cajun blackened catfish is no big mystery. You want your pan so hot that when the fillet hits it, it actually shrinks the fillet instantly from lack of moisture.
If you're using a barbecue, Bill suggests laying the pan right on top of the white hot coals.
First thing you do is you just sprinkle very generously both sides of the fillet with seasoning, even rubbing the seasoning in a little bit so it'll adhere to the fillet.
It's very simple. Just add spice, no shortening or flour.
See it shrinking right up? That's about the right heat for the skillet. You can see the moisture leaving the fillet, and it shrinks to about 1/3 to 1/2 its normal size. And all these fillets need are approximately 1 to 1.5 minutes on a side, depending upon the thickness of the fillet. And when they say blackened, they mean blackened. That's because the fillet turns black. For the catfish, and a little rice, and a green salad.
Not a bad way to end up the day.
Nope. And we toast the Snake River catfish.
After 7 long years, it seems the drought has finally relaxed its hold on our state. The mountain snows are starting to melt, and streams long filled with dust are starting to flow. The earth rejoices in an explosion of color. Lush greens, brilliant yellows, splashes of vivid red. Colors that seem so true and so rich, they can only come from nature's palette. But most incredible of all is an endless field of lavender blue, an extraordinary shade that changes hues as it nods and waves in the wind. Water has restored the land, and the marsh celebrates in an extravagant riot of color. Historically, this stretch of Idaho has been known as the Camas Prairie, named for the prolific lavender blue camas blooms that carpet the valley in the springtime. Towering to the north are the snowy peaks of the Soldier and Smoky Mountains. To the south lie the rolling Bennett Hills. In 1987, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game established a wildlife management area here in cooperation with Ducks Unlimited and the Nature Conservancy. Our state's hunters contributed funding through the purchase of the Idaho waterfowl stamp. In the midst of the prairie, 3,000 acres was set aside for wildlife and named Centennial Marsh in honor of Idaho's first 100 years.
And we have a pretty good population of non-game species like the sandhills, the avocets, the curlews, the willets, the yellowlegs, and the phalaropes. And there's a lot of birds that use this marsh and depend on this marsh.
Habitat biologist Terry Gregory is the caretaker of Centennial Marsh. The hope was that the wetland would provide vital nesting habitat for waterfowl, especially ducks, a species hard hit by habitat loss and drought. But in past years, the demand on the water table for irrigation, combined with the effects of drought, have left the marsh high and dry by early summer, the most critical time to have water if newly hatched ducklings are going to survive. To resolve the problem, Terry has constructed a series of ponds connected to a well by a pipeline and ditch system. And surrounding the ponds, he's planted high, sturdy grasses, perfect nesting cover for waterfowl.
I feel like, yes, we have more birds here than we've had in the past, so I think it is working. I think the birds will continue to come, and once we get that tradition established again, that the birds have a place to come to, the population will increase, so that's our goal.
Nature has joined the struggle, bestowing the gift of a wet, snowy winter to feed the depleted water table. And then, as if that were not enough, in a burst of fanfare, she blankets the prairie in an achingly beautiful blue, a profusion of color that hasn't been seen in such abundance for 30 years. The root of this bright flower is a large, round bulb that has a high starch content. Before the white man settled the prairie, Native Americans, the Shoshone, Bannock, and Blackfoot tribes, would migrate to this area by the thousands each spring to gather the camas root for food.
and they really depended on this. It was one of their staples to get them through the winter. They would roast it and then grind it, dry it, grind it into a flour, and then make a cake out of it, a small cake.
Now the prairie provides for the wildlife, furnishing food and shelter to an amazing variety of birds.
I guess I'd like to think that I'm just making things better here than they were. I enjoy the birds. I enjoy the people being able to see the birds.
A quiet sense of peace envelops the marsh. Time slows and then is forgotten as visitors and residents alike conform to the ancient rhythm of nature. A phalarope, sometimes pronounced phalarope, skims along, a small sandpiper-like bird that seems constantly in motion, rapidly dabbing its bill as it feeds. Stalking gracefully through the higher grasses is a willet, a rather nondescript gray-brown bird that's a cousin to the brighter phalarope. The low, steady hum of the marsh is interrupted by a sandhill crane singing out a warning with her peculiar call. We've stumbled across her secret. 2 large eggs perched on a flat platform of a nest made of dried grasses. She, in turn, invades the territory of a blackbird, who becomes agitated and begins to harass the larger bird in an almost comical show of aggression that seems to have little effect on the plodding pace of the sandhill. A pair of striking black, white, and tan-patterned birds search the shallows, feeding on aquatic insects, seeds, and small crustaceans. The American avocet is easily recognized by its slender, upturned bill and distinctive plumage. Author and conservationist Aldo Leopold writes eloquently in his book, The Sand County Almanac, of his hope that a wildlife legacy be preserved to pass on to his 3 sons. He writes, "I hope to leave them good health, an education, and possibly even a competence. But what are they going to do with these things if there be no more deer in the hills, and no more quail in the coverts, no more snipe whistling in the meadow, no more piping of widgeons and chattering of teal as darkness covers the marshes, no more whistling of swift wings when the morning star pales in the east, and when the dawn wind stirs through the ancient cottonwoods and the gray light steals down from the hills over the old river sliding softly past its wide brown sandbars? What if there be no more goose music?" Aldo Leopold's legacy remains alive in the wonder of Centennial Marsh, a magical place where the music can still be heard. A couple of months ago, we brought you a story from Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains about a wolverine research project. You may remember this ferocious fellow. Well, in the course of last winter, Fish and Game biologists captured 9 wolverines in traps like this. They were immobilized with a drug and then marked with implants, small radio transmitters that are surgically placed in the animal's abdominal cavity. Scientists were delighted to discover that one of the captured females was pregnant. In late May, the biologists followed the radio signal of the pregnant wolverine and located her rearing den. Inside, they found 2 small female kits about 13 weeks old. A rough operation theater was set up, and wildlife veterinarian Dave Hunter performed delicate surgery on the 2 young offspring to fit them with radio implants. Within weeks, they begin to take on the distinctive rich brown and buff coloring of an adult. At about 13 weeks old, this little kit tips the scale at around 4.5 pounds. By the time she's an adult, she'll weigh 19 to 20 pounds. For the next year, scientists will be able to follow the movements of these animals. They hope to discover when they leave the protection of their mother, whether the young siblings stay together, and how they develop a home range. Never before has a wild wolverine kit been fitted with a radio implant. Researchers hope these 2 young animals may unlock a door to the secretive world of the wolverine as it carves its home in the rugged Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. As we close our show tonight, we'll take you to one of the world's largest underground water systems, the Hagerman Thousand Springs area.